Hello and welcome to Rather Good English, the podcast that makes learning English a bit more fun and a lot less confusing. I'm Katy.
And I'm James. Today we're diving into one of English's most delightfully confusing features, words that have two completely different meanings.
Oh, these are brilliant. I was thinking about this the other day when I told my friend to book a table and then realised I was reading a book at the same time.
Right, that's a perfect example.
And speaking of right, there's another one. You just used it to mean correct, but it's also a direction, isn't it? Turn right at the corner.
Exactly. And then there's the legal meaning too. You have the right to remain silent. Same word, three different meanings. So today we are going to go through a few examples for you to hopefully make things a bit clearer in future.
The thing is, context is everything with these words. Like, if I say ring, you might think of jewellery.
Right, an engagement ring or wedding ring.
But if I say the phone's ringing or ring me later, suddenly it's about making a phone call.
And that brings us to watch, another brilliant one. Watch the film means to look at it.
Yeah, but check your watch. That's the thing on your wrist that tells the time.
These words can trip up even advanced English learners because the meanings are so different. Take light, for example. Turn on the light. We're talking about illumination.
But this bag is light means it doesn't weigh very much. Completely different concept.
And you can even have a light blue. That's about colour intensity, isn't it?
Oh yes, so one word, three meanings really. And people wonder why English is so difficult to learn. What about stamp? That's a fun one.
Right, so you stamp your foot when you're angry. That's the action of hitting the ground hard with your foot.
But a stamp is also that little square piece of paper you put on an envelope to post a letter.
Though these days, with email, stamps are becoming a bit old-fashioned, aren't they, today?
True, and not to mention expensive. Now, current is interesting because it's quite technical in both meanings. You can have an electric current.
Yeah, electricity flowing through wires.
Or a water current in the ocean. But current also means happening now. Current events, current affairs.
That's a good one. And speaking of tricky words, mean always catches people out.
Oh yes, what does this word mean? That's asking about definition or meaning.
Right, but don't be mean to your sister. That's about being unkind or nasty.
Exactly. The pronunciation is the same, but the meanings couldn't be more different. And then there's bank. You go to the bank to get money.
But you also sit on a riverbank. That's the edge of the river.
And fine is probably one of my favourites because the meanings are almost opposite. This wine is fine means it's really good, high quality.
But a parking fine is money you have to pay as punishment for parking illegally.
Though if someone asks, "How are you?" and you say, "I'm fine," that just means you're okay.
So that's three meanings for fine. And another one, kind. She's a very kind person means she's generous and caring.
Right. But what kind of music do you like? There we're using it to mean type or category.
The key thing for our listeners to remember is that context really is everything with these words. The words around them, the situation you're in, that's what tells you which meaning is intended.
Absolutely, and don't worry if you get confused sometimes. Even native speakers occasionally need a moment to work out which meaning someone intended, especially in written text.
That's so true. The best way to get comfortable with these is just exposure. Reading, listening, practicing. The more you encounter these words in different contexts, the more natural it becomes.
And remember, getting it wrong occasionally is part of the learning process. We've all been there. Even James still sometimes puts his watch on the wrong wrist.
Hey, that's completely different, but you're right about making mistakes being normal.
Speaking of mistakes, let's talk about some more tricky examples that our listeners have asked about. Duck is one that comes up a lot.
Oh yes, you can feed the ducks at the pond. That's the animal, the bird.
But duck is also what you shout when you want someone to quickly lower their head to avoid something flying at them. Duck! There's a ball coming straight at you.
Exactly. And here's one that confuses a lot of our international listeners. Pitcher. In American English, a pitcher is someone who throws the ball in baseball.
But a pitcher is also a large jug for serving drinks. A water pitcher or a pitcher of lemonade. Same word, completely different objects.
Here's another one that's quite common. Bark. Dogs bark when they're excited or trying to alert you to something.
Right, but bark is also the rough outer covering of a tree. You might see "Don't carve initials in the bark" on a sign in a park.
And then we have bear. You might see a bear in the forest. That's the large furry animal.
But bear as a verb means to carry or support something. Can you bear the weight of this box? Or I can't bear to watch scary movies.
Oh, here's a tricky one that actually has different pronunciations depending on the meaning. Tear. If you have a tear in your eye when you're crying, that's T-E-A-R, like here.
But if you tear a piece of paper, that's T-A-I-R, like hair. Be careful not to tear that important document. Same spelling, different pronunciation and meaning.
That's what we call a homograph. Same spelling, different pronunciation and meaning. There's another one like that. Lead. You can lead a team, L-E-E-D.
Or lead pipes are made of the metal, which is pronounced L-E-D. These can be particularly challenging because you really need to know the context to get the pronunciation right.
You know, for our listeners who are dealing with these challenging words, I always recommend keeping a vocabulary journal. When you encounter these words in different contexts, write down both the sentence and what the word means in that particular situation.
That's excellent advice. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you're unsure. Native speakers use context clues all the time, but sometimes even we need to double check.
Let's look at a few more examples before we wrap up. Match is interesting. You can strike a match to light a fire.
But you can also watch a football match or try to match your shoes with your handbag. And in dating, people look for their perfect match.
And fair. That's got several meanings too. That's not fair means something isn't just or reasonable.
But you can also go to a fair, with rides and candy floss and games. And fair can describe someone with light-coloured hair or skin or even the weather. It's a fair day today.
Here's one that surprises a lot of people. Table. Obviously, it's a piece of furniture you eat dinner on or work at.
But to table something means to postpone discussing it. Let's table that idea for now and come back to it next week. It's more common in business contexts.
And here's one with multiple meanings that are all quite different. Spring. It's the season that comes after winter.
But a spring is also a coiled metal object that bounces, like in a mattress or a pogo stick. And a spring is a natural water source. Plus, you can spring into action, meaning to start moving quickly and energetically.
You know, the amazing thing about these words is how our brains automatically pick up the right meaning from context. If I say, I need to go to the bank before it closes, nobody thinks I'm going to sit by a river.
Exactly. The other words in the sentence, the situation, even the time of day, it all helps us understand. Before it closes immediately tells us it's a business, not a riverside.
For our listeners, I'd recommend paying attention to these context clues when you're reading or listening to English. Notice how the words around these multiple meaning words help clarify which definition is being used.
And remember, if you're ever unsure in conversation, it's perfectly acceptable to ask for clarification. Most native speakers will be happy to explain, and it shows you're actively engaged in understanding, which is fantastic.
I think we've covered quite a few tricky examples today. From book and right to spring and fair, these multiple meaning words really show how rich and complex English can be.
Actually, before we finish, I just remembered a few more examples that are really worth mentioning. Can is particularly interesting because both meanings are so common in everyday conversation.
Absolutely. Can you help me? That's asking about ability or permission.
But can is also a metal container. Pass me a can of beans from the cupboard. And of course, if something goes wrong, we might say we have to can a project, meaning to cancel or stop it.
Here's a lovely one. Mint. You might have mint leaves in your garden for cooking or tea.
But mint also describes something in perfect condition. This vintage car is in mint condition, means it's absolutely pristine. And of course, there's the Royal Mint, where they make coins.
And scale has quite a few meanings. You might weigh yourself on a scale in the bathroom.
But fish have scales covering their bodies. And you can scale a mountain, meaning to climb it. Plus, in music, you have scales, those sequences of notes. Do, re, mi is the beginning of the C major scale.
Oh, and charge. There are so many meanings. You can charge your phone when the battery is low.
But you can also charge someone money for a service. How much do you charge for a haircut? And in movies you might see cavalry soldiers charge into battle, meaning they rush forward aggressively.
I think what's really helpful for learners is to realize that native speakers don't memorize all these different meanings separately. We learn them naturally through exposure and context, which is exactly what our listeners should aim for too.
Exactly. Don't try to learn every possible meaning of every word all at once. Instead, when you encounter these words in real situations, in books, conversations, films, podcasts like this one, pay attention to how context guides you to the right meaning.
And remember, making mistakes with these words is completely normal and part of the learning process. Even native speakers sometimes pause for a moment when they encounter an unusual usage in writing. But for now, that's all we have time for. A bit more of a confusing episode today, but one that is so beneficial. Please leave a like and do subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.